Just Another Job. Part 11. Hunting the Useless. Since the Hoods were still alive and with him, Rem could ask their boss for another favor. Although that would cost him more, he'd be able to go after the useless himself, backed up by rifles, just as he intended to do initially. Meanwhile, his Hood allies would be able to quickly reach the manor since their village was nearby. Broughton had a fast carriage, and his girls were always close by. From what he's heard of them, all three were capable sorceresses, whom the Hoods had saved in the past and then hired to work for them. For sure, Rem would have to part with a lot of gold to compensate them for their services, but the reward for returning the Countess's chest was abnormally large. That way he'd be able to hit 2 targets with 1 arrow, get to learn what's inside the chest if he decided to open it, and ensure Val's safety. Ultimately deciding that this was the wisest and safest for Val choice of action, Rem helped his allies dig the grave for their youngest. Nobody cared about the bodies of their enemies, and the old forest would devour them soon. Working together and working quickly, it took them no more than 10 minutes to dig said grave and bury their companion. Rem, as he devoted Canaanite, said a few chosen words after, praising the young man's bravery and skill. Obviously, were they not strained for time, his body would have been placed under a simple spell and carried back to civilization. The priesthood of Can would then either mummify or otherwise preserve in another way the body, entomb it underground, to be guarded alongside with all of his possessions in Karet's catacombs. In here, with all of the old force's dangers lurking around them, they had no time for fancy stuff. The deceased was nevertheless buried according to tradition and proper ritual. Eventually, the Hoods would pay for a reburial. Can's clergy had a certain canon which barred others from casually exhuming the dead. Took them an hour and a half of constant running until they reached the vicinity of their quarry's camp. The useless, all 11 of them, were moping around, blissfully ignorant of the danger which lurked around them. Accurate to the last word, the information which Broadham had supplied him with allowed Rem to easily fashion his attack. The 5 warriors he'll leave for his Hood friends. Said fighters were calmly dozing around the campfire, their weapons and shields and helmets lying around them. Useless fools. They were about to die snoring. The solver of problems planned on shooting dead the group's mage first, then their 2 archers. Said marksmen were casually strolling around the camp, yet in stark contrast with their sleeping allies, they had their weapons ready. One even held an arrow notched and ready, while the other played with one vicious-looking projectile, twiddling with it. The man held his bow steady, though, and it seemed as if those 2 were perhaps the best of this whole bunch. The magician sat the furthest away from his, quote, companions, reading some book, colorful glyphs formed by shining mana floating above its pages. He needed to dive first. Rem was painfully aware that spellcasters, even weak ones, could easily kill you with some overpowered magic. That or they might be in possession of an artifact. He'd heard and seen many a mercenary felled by wands charged with deadly spells. Said items allowed even the skill-less to unleash devastating magic with effortless ease. Rem quickly calculated the wind speed and decided on which body part he was about to aim for. It was of paramount importance not to let the magical opponent's mouth let slip even one word. Behind the mage and covered with somebody's cloak, Rem's eye noticed a chest-shaped item. After another inquisitive look, scouting the rest of their camp, he logically assumed that this was his goal. What was he imagined this job would be in the beginning? Not someone to mope around after he'd make a mistake or took a job too hard for him to complete on his own. Nevertheless, Rem thought that in hindsight he shouldn't have accepted this one in particular. While he was looking for the best spot to loose his arrows from, his keen eyes noticed one of the rogues. The fool elf was hiding under a makeshift camouflage, covered with shrubs, leaves, and cloaked. The skillless woman thought herself safe. Moreover, it seemed that the useless left her to keep watch over their sleeping asses. He smiled viciously under his iron mask. Considering the time of day, it was already late afternoon. Rem's masterfully skulking figure was almost impossible to notice for one such as her. Noticing that his allies had already snapped the neck of another sneaky useless, the solver of problem chose to throw, swallow, and then recall it, after the woman's body stopped twitching. Rem's trusty dagger pulled itself from the rogue's temple, and after cleaning it, he sheathed the blade, carefully pulling 3 arrows from his silenced quiver. While he stabilized his breathing, Rem noticed his 5 allies slowly surrounding the camp. Then they too aimed their rifles. The solver of problems instructed them to attack only after his arrow had slain the mage. With bated breath, the hoods waited, fingers on their rifles' triggers, while Rem slowly drew the string of his bow fully, aiming at the mage's torso. Rem twisted the string a little bit and then, sweating from the physical strain, loosed it. Silently, the projectile swished through the air and without a hitch impaled the mage exactly where he aimed at. The stupefied caster flew in the air after Rem's arrow smashed his ribcage and then landed a couple feet away from the tree stump, which he'd used as an improvised chair. Fluttering, the book of spells floated in the air, still, pages turning by themselves, magical glyphs shining. It wasn't blasting him with powerful magic missiles or a ball of fire, therefore Rem rapidly notched the second arrow and pulled. His next target, the archer whose bow was ready to shoot. By failing the mage, he had already revealed himself, and both archers screamed, waking up their allies. While they stumbled around, reaching for their weapons and shield, Rem loosed his second arrow. By now his arm was getting tired since stake was a powerful bow, and the solver of problem had already shot a number of arrows with it already. Not to mention running across uneven terrain in the old forest and fighting in melee before that. The archer tried to lower his body in an attempt to evade the arrow before shooting back at him. Alas, the stake magic ended him. The arrow was intended to hit the useless in his gut, but it slammed into his shoulder instead. With another loud crunch, the archer's body rotated madly to the left, while his hand flew in another direction, torn from its socket. The solver of problem was unable to pull his third arrow in time. Undeterred by the deaths of his companions and sporting a rather insane smile, the second archer's barbed projectile found Rem's chest. Screeching metal sparks flying everywhere, the arrowhead blew through Brelt's outer metal plates and impaled the riveted chain, lodging itself exactly 1 inch above Rem's heart. Before the archer could pull, notch, loose another armor-piercing arrow, the hoods fired their rifles. He could see one of them, the old veteran, who aimed at the archer instead, blowing a fist-sized hole in the chest of this useless. The last man left alive decided to run, and just before his silhouette could vanish, hiding behind a tree, Rem's arrow found him. Limping away from the tree line, he carefully dislodged the armor-piercing arrow, imagining how deep said projectile would have went inside his flesh if he took cant instead of Brelt. Never mind the money he'd spend on fixing his suit of armor. Far better it would be able to spend gold than laying dead, quietly riding away while your killers got drunk on your coin. He'd have to heal that horrible bruise and probably a cracked rib for at least a week, using one of his friend's healing ointments. Rem uttered one short prayer to Can, thanking his god that he was still around and breathing, then slowly limped forward. Harder it was for him to breathe, but harder does not mean impossible, and he ate the pain. Felk floated above the corpse-littered camp, inspecting one or another curiosity. Then, after he examined the floating book, his friend exclaimed,
Hans mercy. How was this idiot useless able to even open this book? Eckley Master Ram, help me close it. The damn thing is reading itself.
Fighting with severe chest pain, Rem limped to help, and with combined efforts, both of them managed to close the book, clicking its magical lock. What was it reading, Felk? Did you?
Nope. I did not peek inside. What are you, crazy? I am no beginner, but a wise old lich. Moreover, no magic user worth their mana would ever read a book from the middle. Thankfully, whatever it was, the thing was unable to finish it, Rem. This is scary stuff. 'Twas draining mana from that fool of a mage, and probably have been doing so for days. Now, wrap it up in that piece of cloth over there, and stash the tome in your backpack. I will do some careful research when we return back home.
What about the chest? Is it trapped or safe to move? Give it a good look, will ya? Mumbled Rem, and limped over to help his allies search the bodies of the useless. They might have some gear, ammunition, or potions. Despite the fact that finding coin on them was a very distant probability, after a thorough search, Rem and the Hoods pilfered a hefty sum. Divided evenly, Rem shared a 50 gold plus an odd jewel or two, which he'd be able to peddle for more, perhaps even recovering some of his expenses so far. While they were looting stuff from the bodies of the useless, Felk floated around the chest, investigating. Took them half an hour to search the bodies, stashing everything that could be of use to their person, and then all circled around the alchemically locked chest. The Hoods were waiting for their boss, brought him to contact, and certainly Rem was anxious to hear that Valve was safe. Yet, so far, their magical communicator had remained silent.
What do you want me to do, boss? Surely this job smells like well-plotted trouble if you and I have ever seen one.
Felk whispered ominously, his helmeted skull shrouded with mana.
I am sure that the locks is not within the ability of most alchemists to open. Yet it is me we are talking. You only need say it and I will pop this lid.
Rem looked at the beautifully engraved chest and scratched his neck. Now the time came for him to make a choice most difficult. On one hand, he could order Felk to use his considerable skill and unlock the alchemically sealed chest, then probe its contents. Although, what would happen when his employer caught wind of this serious breach of contract? Rem thought for a second, removed his helmet, and spat angrily on the ground. To the vortex with her. No. Something sinister was afoot, and he, a neutral solver of problems, had suddenly been placed right in the middle of it all. He gave Felk the go and waited, sweating, trying to divine what the contents of this all-important alchemically locked chest were, and of course, Broadham's call. On the other hand, Rem had plenty of problems right now. Somebody wanted him gone. Moreover, the same somebody was in command of well-equipped, skilled agents. Said agents were also sent to snatch his innocent housemaid and deliver her to this mysterious mastermind, quote, alive and unspoiled. After Rem saved the unsuspecting girl from the claws of that cult, he had hoped that she was just yet another of their would-be victims. Apparently, that seemed not to be the case, and he reminded himself to investigate into those slaying cultist activities more. Rem asked one of the hoods to pick up the Countess's still safely locked chest and then move out. If they hurried and took shifts carrying the thing, running, they could be safely out of the forest in a couple of hours. 1,000 gold coins were quite the tidy sum, and Rem could care less what that creepy countess used the chest's contents for. More probably it was chock full of rare, obscure spell ingredients, such as dried bat wings, pickled eyes, and mummified monster flesh. Well, if you've enjoyed the story thus far, go right on ahead, hit that like and subscribe. Don't forget to share. Also, go right on ahead to minds.com and support the author of this series. He's gone by the name Aragmar. He's also known as the Black Knight. He has his own book series, Star Shatters, is a sci-fi novel. You might want to check it out if you're into alternate history sci-fi. It's a really different take on things in a direction I don't think anyone else has really considered. Alrighty, well that's all that I have for today. I hope you're enjoying your day. Hope you enjoyed this telling. So with that, take care of yourselves out there. God bless and farewell.